Hey, welcome back to The Pursuit, everybody. I'm Jeff Hutchin. This is John Saborov. And today's episode is being brought to you by Realty One Premier Group. Just so happens we're recording on
site,
on premise.
on their premises.
I mean, The truth of the matter is we got booted out of the house.
We got evicted.
And our new studio's not quite ready yet.
Yeah.
And so Gary and Bob and the group over here at Realty One said, come on over. And so we're broadcasting from here today. These guys are one of the fastest growing real estate brands in the United States, and they're part of a global brand with a global network of excellent agents. And these guys take a really cool, untraditional approach, which I really appreciate. They hold strong to what they call their you first focus, and they pride themselves on being a family of equals. Their top-notch agents approach their clients with the same values in mind. Work with a knowledgeable agent that you can trust with one of the most important purchases you'll ever make. So check them out, if you would, at Realty One Group Premier.
All one word.
Realty One Group Premier versus what? You gonna put spaces in it?
Spaces, dashes.
Have you ever put spaces in a website?
Yeah, in 1997.
So thank you to Realty One, Bob and Gary and the group over there. You guys are absolutely awesome. Well, today we have a guest back on again with us today, Dr. Smith. I know I've spoken to several of you that watch and listen to the Pursuit, and this has become quickly one of your favorite guests. He has so much to share, and we're excited to dive into today's topic. His book is out. Is it out yet, Doc, or are you still just taking
pre-orders?
Orders?
Still just taking pre-orders at the time. It should be printed just any moment. We're just waiting on a few touch-ups.
Well, we got the link to the website where they can order it below, and we know that some people actually already have after one episode.
You know, here's the deal. You know, with big authors like Dr. Smith, really famous people, they do pre-orders because they're like, I'm in no rush. I'll just get the book out. Guys like me, I was like, I did everything I could to just get the thing out. And so if you're a big-time author like Dr. Smith, you can do pre-orders.
You can do whatever you want.
Of course, we're kidding with you, Dr. Smith. We love you, my man. Hey, just a couple reminders of Dr. Smith and a little bit about him. He is the executive director of Digging Deep Ministry, and we're going to be talking a lot about that ministry today and some of the findings that they've had. He's also founder and director of the Early Church Research Institute. Dr. Smith, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, John. It's good to be with you.
We had a great conversation with you last time, and we dove into the icons of the early church and some of the things that they were indicating and beginning to show. And I tell you, I don't know about you, John, but I had multiple conversations with viewers and listeners of The Pursuit, asking a lot of questions. And man, I was just at a dinner party the other night, and we were sitting around enjoying a great glass of wine, and they started asking me about, so tell me more about these icons. What have you read in the book? Tell us more about Dr. Smith. What's he doing? I think I've already filled our trip, Dr. Smith, that we're planning to take to Israel this spring. So
if you haven't already, you just have now with the listeners. They're going to be emailing you saying, how do I get involved and how do I go on that trip? But the way I've been characterizing it has been, we use text messaging all the time with these things called emojis, right, which are just modern day icons. And just the way I think of it in my simple mind is that I could text you something, and just the words the way that you read it, you would see through the lens of the way that you would interpret it. But I can inform your interpretation by adding emojis. So, he was just joking, right?
Yep.
Which I normally am. But how cool is that, Dr. Smith? And just to sort of recap, for maybe those that didn't hear the first time around, just a real quick recap. When we talk about the icons around the text that you're finding, let the listeners know kind of what that's helping you discover in terms of a new layer of interpretation.
Well, it does add definitely a new layer of interpretation. I've been reading the Bible almost my whole life. I've studied it years in school. And honest truth, John, I feel like I'm reading the Bible for the first time. It's a whole new context. It's all about context. If you don't have the right context, you can't understand. For example, we talk about the birth of Jesus. We all know the story. We've seen, the nativity sets in everybody's front yard at Christmas time, and we have this picture in our mind of what it was like, and we say, well, the inn was full, so Jesus went out, back. Mary went out back to have Jesus, and in a red barn with white stripes, and a manger and a donkey and a cow. Because I have a barn out back, and it's red, and it has a donkey and a cow, so it must be the same thing. No, it was quite the opposite, actually. When the inn was full, the guest chamber was full. Mary then went to the holiest place of all, where the sacrificial lambs were born. So the stable is where the priests, the holiest of all the priests, their sole duty was to protect, after they chose those sacrificial lambs when they were born, they were without spot and without blemish. Well, it was their responsibility to keep them without blemish. Because if they fell into the briars or got attacked by a wolf, then they had no sacrifice for the next year. So they would put these lambs in this cave and protect them. It's a stable. This is where Jesus was born. So is it more significant that Jesus was born where the sacrificial lambs for our sins was born, and he was laid in the manger where they ate? And so that changes our view of the whole Christmas story. We've learned so much. Mary was not a poor little Jewish girl. That family was very rich. Matter of fact, Jesus grew up very wealthy because the whole family had money and they were royalty, part of David's family. And Jesus walked away from all of it. He hired a treasurer to take care of the money. His name was Judas Iscariot, and said, "You take care of the money, give it all away. Take care of the poor, the hungry, the widows. I don't want it."
Wow.
And it's a whole different picture than what we've kind of created in our mind. So
That's
these icons, this information, open up a whole new layer.
Yeah, that takes things to such a deeper level. Just talking about the birth of Jesus, and we talked about last week or last episode with you. We talked about Bethlehem, where the Bethlehem Ephratah is. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Close enough. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for being kind to me, Dr. Smith, and not correcting me. No, but we discovered last time that's where, as you already mentioned, that's where the lambs were raised for the temple sacrifice, and just adding that context to Jesus' birth in the manger, and now understanding that at a deeper level. That is extremely powerful.
We were talking before the show about the prophecy in Daniel 12:4 that says, as we get to the last days, that the knowledge will cover the earth as the water covers the sea, right? And it will increase and increase. And I was telling Dr. Smith, sort of thought about that as, of course, as we progress in advancement, we learn more about technology, we discover new things. And so that's what the context is. And really, he corrected me, he said, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Dr. Smith, but as we talk about prophecy and end times and revelation, really Daniel 12:4 and the increase of knowledge is all around the context of end time prophecy and revelation.
Absolutely. There are certain elements that have to be known, have to be understood, that's been hidden for 2,000 years. These have to happen in order for prophecy to be fulfilled, for the end times to be complete. For example, temple worship. There are elements, we know from Daniel that the temple will be rebuilt and the temple worship will start up again. Well, there's certain elements that have to be understood and happen that's kind of been lost. And now, because of this new information, this new language, if you will, and all the information we're uncovering, now it's making sense we've never understood before.
So, Dr. Smith, is as I was mentioning the dinners that we've been having over the last couple of weeks since your last episode, one of the topics that keeps coming up with friends and relatives is this idea of the times that we're living in right now, and the fact that it sure feels like we're getting to the end. It sure feels like things are beginning to close in on us. And you and I were having this conversation off camera. And that's really where we want to head with our conversation today, because based on what you were telling me, there's a few more things, pretty significant things, that need to happen before the things that we read about in the book of Revelation begin to unfold. Let's climb into those, and let's begin to unpack each one of those, starting with the holy fire. Why don't you speak about that to us?
Most Christians have never heard of the holy fire. Now, the rabbis in Israel, they know about it, They don't know what it was. We have learned, again, because we now have new information, because God's given me the ability to read what they've written. And now we're putting together a whole new layer of information we didn't have before. Now we've learned the holy fire was a liquid. It was a liquid they would take. And so when they ignited the fires on the altar for the sacrifices in the temple, they'd pour this liquid out. And when the sun hit it, it would self-ignite. And of course, everybody said, that's a miracle of God. Well, it was a miracle of God. And God gave the priest the formula for it. But it's been lost. They don't know today what it is. We're on the verge of cracking that code. We now know where they kept it. We know roughly what it was. We just have to fine tune the formula. But the gate that goes into the Temple Mount area is called the Dung Gate today. Well, that's misnamed. The reason they call it the Dung Gate is because they said, well, that's where they brought in the dried cow dung, and then they would use that cow dung to light the sacrifices. No way. There's no way you're going to offer a holy sacrifice to God lit with cow dung. Okay. So we got digging and we found out the old name for it was the fuel gate. And someone assumed the fuel was cow dung, so they named it the dung gate. No, it's the fuel gate. Well, what was the fuel gate? That's where they brought in the holy fire. It was a secret formula the priests had, and only they knew. And they have to have that in order to have temple worship. Like I said, we now know where it was, what it was, how it worked. We're just fine-tuning the formula. It does work. We pour this out in the sunshine and it self-ignites. It's incredible. First time in 2,000 years it's been found.
Wow. Have you heard anything like that?
I've not. I want to see it though.
So these are literally natural substances that the rabbis would use, the priests would use to mix together to create this flammable substance?
Yes. And they had to store it in a place that was out of daylight, obviously, so it all didn't self-ignite. Now we know where they stored it. It was a very holy place where they stored it.
And the powerful thing about that is it's also transportable, right? So as the Jews were sent into exile and other places, they would be able to carry this material with them for when it's needed for the sacrifice.
And they did, because Maccabees said, take some of the holy fire with you into Babylon. That's what they had told them at the time, and Maccabees records that.
You know what I always vision when I think about that, Doc, is I think about those censers, right, that we see oftentimes used in especially in the Roman Catholic Church, the censers that have the incense that they'd swing back and forth. That's kind of what I envision on how they would transport a holy fire, as some sort of container that allows them to maintain the embers that they could then later use. But boy, that would be difficult to administer over a long time of travel for sure.
Right.
And as we get into the next two things, which are equally amazing, I wonder, and this is a question I've got, and I wonder if viewers out there might have it as well, which is, how did these things get lost? So you mentioned the fire, and this was something that was entrusted to the priesthood. And this got lost over the years. And the other two things that we're going to be talking about as well are things that were lost and are being discovered and recovered. What happened over the last 2,000 years, if you were to sort of summarize it in 2 minutes? But just to answer, how did these things get lost over time?
Easiest way to answer that, John, is context. Context. In the late 300s and the end of the Byzantine era, 325, the Council of Nicaea, Constantine Eusebius of the Council of Nicaea redefined the context of everything. Of course, Constantine ruled the world, so he had that ability to do that. Well, that began the end of what's called the Byzantine era, or the real church, the church that we've discovered, the early church. And so as the Constantine ruled the world, he began to take over and enforce his ideas and concepts. And by 450, 500s, it was completely lost. 600s, the Muslims took over, Islam took over the Israel area called the Levant, and it became basically a wasteland until 1947.
Got it.
And now it's all being rediscovered slowly but surely. So, honest truth, biblical archaeology, it's changed dramatically since I started in 2005. All of Israel's changed dramatically since 2005. It was almost a third world country when I started working there just a few years ago. And everything's on an exponential curve. When we started working there, archaeology was easy. Now everybody wants to watch over your shoulder, and they should, but it's changed so much in the last few years, and God allowed me to get in at a good time. So that's how it's been lost, but now it's starting to all come back together.
Let's talk about the second item. And you talk about Rachel. Rachel, her tomb needs to be discovered. Why? What is significant about Rachel's tomb that has anything to do with the end times?
That's a great question, Jeff. Jeremiah 31:15, everyone knows well. Behold, a voice was heard in Ramah, bitter weeping and wailing, Rachel weeping for her children because they were not. Well, we know that prophecy was fulfilled in Matthew 2 because God says so. So when the slaughter of the innocents happened, when Jesus was born, when he was 2, Mary and Joseph fled to Egypt. Herod went in and killed all the babies 2 and under, trying to destroy the Messiah. Okay, so we know Jeremiah 31:15 was fulfilled then. Verse 16 has not been fulfilled. Verse 16 says, roughly, Rachel, stop weeping. Your prayers have been heard, and your children will be gathered together into the land. So what did Rachel have to do with the first prophecy? Why Rachel? I mean, what's she got to do with it? Well, where was Rachel buried? She was buried in Bethlehem, Ephrata, the same place Jesus was born. So what did Rachel have to do with the slaughter of the innocents? That's where it happened. That's where it literally happened, at Rachel's tomb. So what does Rachel have to do with the regathering of God's people? That's the key. That's the catalyst. Bethlehem Ephrata, most people don't realize, was the second holiest city, second only to the Temple Mount. So if we find Bethlehem Ephrata, we'll also find the real birth site of Jesus. We'll find where David was born and raised, and we'll find Ruth and Boaz's threshing floor. And we're on the verge of uncovering, revealing all of this information. We are very confident that Rachel's body is still there. And there's a high probability that her body was mummified. And so for that prophecy to be fulfilled, that place has to be found. And I believe her body will be found as well.
So a lot of your work right now with Digging Deep Ministry, you're in Bethlehem Ephrata. There, I said it right. Are you doing a majority of your work there, or is that kind of your focal point?
That's my favorite focal point because it was so holy, and so much happened there that we have no idea of all that happened, that took place there. The priest, it was a priestly city, not a Levitical city, a priestly city, and is very holy, very sacred. And the truth is that needs to be rebuilt before the temple is rebuilt.
And if you feel like you and your team are starting to zero in on that location where she might be found.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Now, when we go to visit in this spring, are you gonna take us into this area and kind of show us some of the archaeological digs that you have there?
I don't know the answer to that. I can promise you I'll get you close enough you can see it. Can I get you in there? It depends on the political climate at the time.
I
Fair enough.
imagine.
Fair enough. Who controls that area? Just as a side note, who has control over that particular area?
That's a tough one, Jeff. It's actually a sea territory. From the Oslo Accords, they said, okay, A territory is Palestinian. So if we go in the city and it's Palestinians live there, we'll call it Palestinian city. And B territory is Jewish. So if we go in, there's Jews living there, mostly Jews. It's a Jewish territory. It's B territory. And C territory is kind of no man's land. There's nobody there. It's up for grabs. Well, that's what all this, this establishing these settlements is about, the occupied territory. And that simply means who's occupying that territory. Is it Jews or Palestinians? This area is in sea territory. It's a no man's land, so it's kind of up for grabs right now. And it's a political hot potato right now, to be honest with you.
Makes sense.
Doc, what about the third aspect of what needs to be uncovered as we before the end times can happen, right? Around the articles of the temple and the original furniture. You talked about some of the replicas that have been reconstructed according to specifications that are outlined in the Bible. But what about the uncovery and discovery of the original articles, the original furniture?
John, this is the biggest topic in debate today that I know of, at least in my world. The question comes, well, do we have to have the originals? Now, the men at the Temple Institute in Jerusalem have done a phenomenal job. A man several years ago, just realized he was a priest. He said, you know what? If there's going to be temple worship, we have to do it. And so we need to train the priesthood and prepare for it. And so he's raised the money. He's remade all of the items for the temple. He's trained the priests. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. He's done a phenomenal job. The silver trumpets, they've remade out of pure silver. They're 6 foot tall. They're huge. They've actually recreated a menorah. It's amazing the work they've done, and that has to be done as part of it. From my understanding and my understanding of the Bible, that's all fine, but that doesn't replace the ark. The ark, the menorah, the table of showbread, the altar of incense, the originals. And one of the big debates is, well, the Bible says the tabernacle of David will be reestablished. So is it the tabernacle or is the temple going to be rebuilt? Our studies, our new layer of understanding, the answer is yes. Both. The temple will be rebuilt, but the original tabernacle will be found as well. So we need the original Ark of the Covenant. Now, that's a huge, huge discussion. Everybody wants in on that one. But we have a ton of information, and it's exciting. It's exciting what's coming.
And actually, we in our discussion in our last episode, we were talking a little bit about the gold tablets, and I think what you were sharing with us is some of those signs are pointing to many of these things that you're describing that are contained within those gold tablets. So that's part of your interpretation that you're pulling from
almost
this.
like a treasure map or something,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yes. I would love to, because I know our time's short, I'd love to come back on and come on with a good friend of mine. His name is John Groders. He's a documentary filmmaker. He's a Christian guy. His passion is to use media, Hollywood, to spread the gospel. Just a great guy, served God for years, done many wonderful works, projects. I believe he has shot more documentaries in the Middle East than any other producer. Just his work is stellar. Dear friend of mine, the guy is brilliant. He's a genius. And he's wanting to put together a team. And we believe with this new layer of information and all the new information we have, we believe now we have the ability to find those temple treasures. So the treasure map has been found. We've already have the treasure map. Now we just have to decode it. So we've actually laid out 10 seasons. We have 10 full seasons of documentaries we want to produce. We're getting ready to produce to bring this information to the world, because it's complicated. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of discoveries along the way to be able to decode this map. Many people have tried to decode the map. There's actually, I know, 1 doctorate degree and 2 master's degrees I know of that tried to decode the map, and nobody's been able to do it yet. We believe with this new information, we'll be able to decode the map and thus ultimately find.
From my own knowledge, a couple more questions before we wrap up today. The first one is, in order for all of this to take place, a peace treaty needs to take place. A peace treaty needs to be put in place. Talk about why that peace treaty is necessary, and are we in the throes of that right now? Has that begun, or is that something that still has to happen?
The peace treaty is necessary because God says it's going to happen in Daniel chapter 9. The peace treaty will allow for the temple to be rebuilt on the Temple Mount and temple worship to begin again. In middle of the 7-year tribulation, the Antichrist will break that peace treaty and stop the temple worship, go in and set on the throne, set the false prophet on the throne and say that he's God. Okay, that's coming. But the temple has to be rebuilt first and real temple worship reinstituted. The peace treaty is on the table right now. The peace treaty is put together by Donald Trump. Jared Kushner wrote the peace treaty. I've read all 40 pages of it. I understand it exactly. It does need some tweaking. We know that. But this is definitely the peace treaty that Daniel talks about. And it's on the table now. And if for no other reason a person should believe that we're in the last, not the last days, the last hours. A friend of mine said the last minutes. We are right at the end. This is prophecy being fulfilled. And if for no other reason, people need to wake up and realize this is it, because the peace treaty is on the table.
Who are the parties included in the treaty?
Well, it's a peace treaty for the land of Israel. So it's between Palestine and the Jews. And it's a treaty to make them where they can work together in the same country. It's a two-state solution, 2 states within a state is the idea. And I can tell you this, my personal opinion, Jeff. Shimon Peres was the president of Israel for several years. He was a wonderful, wonderful guy. I liked him a lot. And he put together several peace treaty offers and submitted them to Abbas. Abbas turned down every one. And those peace treaties he turned down were very, very, very attractive for Palestine. And Abbas turned them down. I do not believe that Abbas will ever sign any peace treaty, period. And he has said that. He's not going to sign one. But Abbas is 84 now, I believe. When Mohammed Abbas is no longer the ruler of Palestine and a new ruler steps on the scene, mark my words, the next one will sign it. And that's going to happen, I believe, in the next 6 years.
And one of the challenges I know, and I just want to see your thoughts on this, that I've heard is right now the Dome of the Rock is covered with the Golden Dome, right? Is that the original location of the temple, or is there a spot just to the, I don't know what direction that would be, just to the north of that, I believe, that where the temple will be built? In other words, does that have to be taken down in order for the original temple to be rebuilt?
No, actually, the Bible says it will stay there. The original temple everybody assumes the original temple stood in the middle of the temple platform. Nobody said it was in the middle. We assumed that. Actually, we know from our studies it was off to the northwest, in the northwest corner of the temple platform. And actually, I was reading a Mishnah portion written in the 1200s by a priest, reading it the other day. And he told exactly where it stood, is exactly where Israel believes it stood, and where, everything points to. So it will be rebuilt in its original location, and there will be a wall built between the two. Because when John's measuring the temple that he sees, God says, the holy, the unholy, and profane leave out. Don't measure it. That's the side with the Mosque of the Dome of the Rock. And so that will stand in the end times, and the temple will be rebuilt, and the two will coexist together on the Temple Mount.
Last question, and we'll wrap up. I know this is a very long, it's a short answer, but probably a very long explanation, which we won't get into now. Where do you fall on the rapture of the church? Pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib?
I grew up as a pre-trib guy. That's how I grew up. That's how I was taught. The more I learn, it doesn't make sense. It's just not there. Now, I know all the arguments for the rapture pre-trib. I know those arguments because I wrote some of those arguments, okay, from the language. It's just not there. It just isn't there. Quick answer, just to think about. And I know I'm going to get crucified for this one, but think about it. Our theology said that we've been taught, our traditional theology says, well, the tribulation is for the Jews. They're going to be punished because they were bad, and God's going to punish them. Well, the only problem with that is my Bible says that we Gentile believers are Jews. Romans 11 says that we're grafted into the Jews. We're a wild olive branch, but yet we're grafted in. Galatians 5 says, if any man be in Christ, he's the seed of Abraham. Sorry, but the seed of Abraham is a Jew. So that's one of the things we've learned in everything we've read is the early church, there wasn't a difference between the Jews and Christians. They were the same. They worshiped together, served together the same God. So it's a lot to take in, I know. It's kind of a shocker.
That's a whole nother episode for a whole nother time. It's good stuff.
I'm trying to put myself in your position and imagine knowing all this stuff. And I know that you knew the answer about the Byzantine Empire. I know you were over there like, come on, John.
I was checking him. I was checking his dates,
you were
make
just
sure
checking,
he was okay.
How many times have you told me that?
Well, he started off saying 300. It's really 325. He corrected himself.
And he rounding error.
We're good.
But as you see things unfold, as you discover things, I can only imagine how exciting it must be for you to have this knowledge. It's exciting for me to hear about it, knowing that, just at a surface level, some of the things that need to happen. And granted, we're digging in, man. We're in the middle of a teaching on Revelation and really digging into this. But I can only imagine what it must feel like to you to begin to see these things happening. And actually, I'm reminded that in Daniel 12, that you're now part of the fulfillment of this prophecy around the increase of knowledge on the earth because you're revealing it. So how cool is that?
Yeah. We're blessed to have you on board, my man. Dr. Smith, thank you so much. We're excited to have you and John Gruters back to dive in and talk a little bit more about this and other things and other findings that you guys have. And that's really cool to hear about your documentary series. It's going to be coming out really soon. So we'll hopefully be able to talk more about that and more about what you guys are going to be revealing in those without giving away all the cool stuff.
Next episode with them, I'm wearing my Indiana Jones hat. Just
That's
count
right.
on it. It's happening.
As long as just leave
John.
your whip at home. That's all I ask. All right. Hey, thank you for watching The Pursuit, everybody. I hope everybody had an awesome time today and learned something really cool. I know I did. Dr. Smith is going to be back on board with us. Make sure you jump online. Check out our website at thepursuitonline.com. We got all kinds of really cool resources out there from other contributors that are providing perspectives and things that they're pursuing with God. So make sure you go check that out. Anything else?
Subscribe. Hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. Did you say that already?
Thanks for adding.
Yeah.
Thanks for adding a lot to our close here today. Hey, thanks for joining us,
You're on a roll,
everybody.
my man.
I'm a little feisty this morning. Hey, hope everybody has a great week. We'll see you next time on The Pursuit.
See ya.